Hello, TCI family. Happy Thursday as I bring you our Thursday message this week. The last few weeks have had a lot of changes in the church, a lot of changes in our organizational structures and things that are happening. All good, all positive. I've updated the board, so I'd like to update you, but our organization is expanding down into Pierce County, which is exciting. And we're already in King County, which is Seattle region. Pierce County is south of that. That's the Tacoma region. These are areas where a lot of inmates come out of prison because they're large, the two largest cities or counties, if you will, in the state. And so the need for housing for men and women as they come out of prison is really, is unfortunately really not available. And it's exciting because we have these opportunities. You know, we have opportunities in our life every day. I don't use the term problems. I don't have problems. I have opportunities. And that's a mindset. And that's a mindset that you need to acquire. And that is a positive mindset. So when you hear me refer to things like be positive, the positive thing is changing words in our own mouths, how we speak things. And I still, every once in a while, catch myself saying, oh, that's going to be a problem. And then I'll say, I mean opportunity. Okay, so it's not, I don't want you to think I wake up speaking opportunity, positive language 24/7. No, I'm a human. I'm like anybody. I get hurt. I get emotional. I want to lash back. I want to pick you up and knock you down if you hurt my family or friends and loved ones. I'm like any other human. I have all of those fears and emotions that come at you. But that's just 10% of the life, right? 90% of it, that's what we do with it. Today I want to talk to you actually about an old king in the Bible. And he was a king of Israel. Now you can look at this from a business standpoint. You can say to yourself, the king represents a CEO of a huge corporation, or the head of a nonprofit, or the head of a church. There's a lot of things you can look at it as, but the king, his name was Saul. He was the first king of Israel, Jerusalem, the country of Israel. And so Israel wanted a king. So they got a king and they elected him, and his name was Saul. And so Saul was chosen to be the king. Now, Saul was a very tall man, they say, over 6 feet, which at that time, they did have the average height, if I remember from my studies in Hebrew, I want to say the average man, and this is going back like, what, 3,500 years ago or something? I think the average height back there was 5'6", so that was an average, and I could be off by just an inch or so. So to be over 6 feet, I think someone said they believe that he was somewhere between 6'3", 6'5". It depends on which authors and historical records you search out. But the point is, he was a tall man. He was also known as a very good-looking man. He had very a look upon himself that women loved and men wanted to be him. He carried himself. He had a presence about himself. He was a warrior. So this is things that when you look for a king, and they looked for all those traits, and that was who God appointed as the king. And so the people, of course, agreed, and that was their election, if you will, by their agreement. Well, Saul, he, again, started like all kings do. You rule your kingdom. You oversee the daily operations. There's always expansion going on in countries. Israel was expanding. Israel had, wars every year. They had wars every summer. There was a rival tribe that was coming to take what was Israel's, and Israel was taking what was someone else's, and there's always this fighting, right? Same thing with companies. You have a CEO, they put a new territory in the state of Texas, and they're trying to overtake the other company that's selling, Coke products, and they're now selling Pepsi products, and so their war is no longer blood and fists, but their war is sales, and trying to open up new distribution centers. And this giant came into the history of the Israelites. His name was Goliath. Now, Goliath was a man that some say, and it depends on who you listen to, they say was in excess of 10 or 12 feet tall. They do have, science has shown in graves that they had giants in our earth, that we have had men and women who were giants that were 10 to 12 feet tall. And we find the bones all over the earth. So there was a generation of giants, and some of that DNA has still lived and is currently living. That's why you have men that are so huge and women that are so tall, 7, 8 feet. I mean, one of my good friends was 7, 8. I remember when I gave him a hug last, I was staring at his belly button practically. So there are tall men. Well, this man Goliath was a giant. And he was arguing and telling the entire tribe, they got into a valley. And think of the valley as a slope like so, right? Like kind of like a bucket, a bowl, if you will. And on this side was the Israelites, and on this side you had Goliath and his guys, the Philistines, and they wanted to go to war. So traditionally they would send men down in the valley, and then they'd fight, and whoever won, that kingdom or that kingdom, would be the winner. Okay? But instead they decided, we're going to send out our best warrior. His name's Goliath. One man. You send out your best warrior. You both come down to the valley, you fight, whoever wins, that's it. It's decided by one fight, only 2 men fighting that one fight. Every day Goliath would come out and he would taunt the Israelites. Send out your best, your God is nothing, you are nothing, yada, yada, yada. Finally, this guy named David, a little shepherd boy, a little boy, he was literally a teenage boy. He went to the battlefront because his brothers was there. And he was a shepherd boy, but his father said, I want you to take this package to your brothers. And I want you to give your brothers some cheese and some meat and crackers and things. So he took this food and these replenished his family's sustenance to eat. While there, he sees this giant. He's like, hey, what's going on? Why are we even letting this guy talk smack about us? I love that attitude, right? And his brother kind of was like, get out of here, boy. You're not even a man. Go back to tending the sheep. And keep in mind, he's a shepherd teenage boy. A shepherd teenage boy at that time, like David, could take a little stone pebble in his slingshot, and he could hit another stone pebble the same size off of a fence post or on top of a rock from between 30 and 40 feet. We're not talking 30 or 40 feet. You think like that's no biggie, right? Go get a pebble and try to hit another pebble 30, 40 feet away. You're going to feel like it's 20 miles away. But shepherds were trained how to use that stone pebble in a slingshot to kill a bear, to kill a tiger, to kill a mountain lion. Tigers and bears, oh my, right? So he had already killed bears with his hands. He'd already killed tigers and lions and all these creatures that came after his critters that he was shepherding, the sheep. And he was a powerful young man with that sling. So he decided, I'm going to kill him. So he told the king, I'll kill him. I'll fight him. Went in there to King Saul, and Saul said, here, let me put all my armor on you. So here's David, right? He's getting all armored up with the king's armor. And then all of a sudden, he's like, I've never fought with this armor. I'm a shepherd boy from the hills. I don't need all this. I got my sling. I need to go pick out 5 stones. That's all I need. People always say, why did he get 5 stones? Did he not think he'd get the first shot? I said, no, Goliath had 4 brothers. He knew he had 1 stone for Goliath, and he'd go kill the other 4. He was a very confident man because he was trained to kill lions and tigers and bears. Oh, my. So he walked down that hill, and Goliath laughed at him. And here's this little boy, and he's laughing at him, saying, you guys send a boy to fight me? Well, that little boy took that slingshot, and you know the story. Tagged him right here. The little stone stuck right in his forehead, went into the forehead and killed him. Right there. Done. Now, he walked over, picked up the sword of Goliath, which was bigger than him, and chopped off Goliath's head. The rest of it's history, right? The king said if you killed Goliath, whoever killed him would get his daughter as a hand in marriage. So David received the king's daughter, and he was the most prized warrior now in an entire country. And yet he was just a boy, a teenage boy. Well, the history books tell us as they went further and went longer that this young man, David, became a man, became a great warrior for Israel. And he went out and killed not thousands, but tens of thousands. And there's a song that the women would sing when the King Saul, and David, his right-hand soldier, would come back into the city from their campaigns, their war campaigns. And what they would sing, the women would say, Saul, the king, has slain his thousands, but David has slain his tens of thousands. Right then is the moment that Saul, the king, allowed his ego to control him. And it destroyed him. Literally, it destroyed him. You see, at that point, he allowed jealousy to come in. Wait a second, the guy next to me killed tens of thousands? So what? I'm the king. I'm good looking. I'm powerful. I'm the one that appointed him in the position he's in. And they're not singing my praises as great as his. So he allowed the ego, the egotistic side of man and woman to come out. And unfortunately, it killed him. And David, at that moment, owned King Saul. You guys have heard me talk about don't let someone own you. All Saul could think about for the rest of his days of his life was how to kill David. Because David was taking his kingdom. David was taking his glory. The sad part is, David, when Saul was later chasing him in these cave caverns throughout the land, there was a time when he went to sleep in a cave. His whole army was outside the cave. David and his army were not too far from there, and they heard that he was inside that cave. So one of his men said, hey, Dave, guess what? There's a back passage in that cave. I can get you in there. We can go in and kill Saul and get this over with. Let's just kill the king. It's done. You're the king. And he said, are you out of your mind? That's the king that God appointed. I'm not going to touch that. That's our king. I will never kill our king. So even when the king was trying to kill him, he refused to be as dirty as the king was playing. By all means, he should have been justified. I'll be honest with you. I wish I could stand in front of you and say to you right now that I wouldn't have killed him, that I would have been as good of a man as David was. But I don't know if I would have. I'll be honest with you. I'm just being truthful. My first reaction, gut him. Get it done with. End it. Stop the suffering. Take over and see what happens. That's my first knee-jerk reaction. But something inside of David said, this is God's choice. He picked him. God has to take him out, not me. I will not touch God's anointed. So he cut off a piece of his robe to show him the next day, hey, king. And he waited until he woke up and he was on top of the mountain and he yelled down, yo, King Saul, look what I got. I got your robe. And he looked down and seen that he had lost a piece of his robe that had been cut in the middle of the night, which symbolized he could have lost his life to David. Could have easily been taken. But he didn't. And he said, Saul, I've done nothing to you, my king. Please stop chasing me. I am your servant, even while you're chasing me. So you see, Saul was owned by David. David owned Saul. And it's sad because this man was so great and had such a great calling on his life, but he messed it up, allowed that ego to destroy himself. Now, we all have an ego. You could tell me Mother Teresa doesn't have an ego when she was alive, and I would say you're wrong. She does. She probably just has the smallest amount of ego in the world. And you probably know people like that, but we all have egos, and we all can allow our egos to make decisions for us. I will not be spoken to like that. Sometimes that's our ego speaking. Sometimes we need to be spoken to in a certain way, to roust us, to shake us, to shudder us and say, okay, what is wrong? Oh man, I didn't realize I was that far off course. Thanks for rattling my cage. Well, other times you're right. You shouldn't be spoken to in a rude way. But the point is, our ego, it's such a fine line, juggling this thing called an ego. And so you look at David being chased by a man who is literally controlled by David because all he can think of is David. You ever met someone like that? See, as an employer and a person who has spent his life running companies and nonprofits and churches across the country and internationally, I am here to tell you, when you find talent, you should promote that talent and not be afraid of the talent. One of the key things that I was never afraid of in my career was when I saw great talent, I grabbed it and I scooped it up and put it into our organization. And I said, here, this guy or this gal are amazing people and they're going to thrive. I want the spotlight on them. Let them preach. Let them run the sales. Let them take off. And friends would say, wait a second, he's a little better than you. Are you serious? Why do you think I hired him, knucklehead? Of course I hired him because he's a better salesman than me. And I was one of the greatest. But I saw someone better. And I took that talent and said, come to work for me. But everyone was saying, be afraid. He could take your job. My job is to make him as good, if not better than me. And if I did that right, then I got the credit without having to try to get the credit. Now, what they're afraid of is that guy becomes so powerful that he takes over the empire, right? Or takes over your job. So the CEO sees up-and-coming vice presidents, right? Executive VPs, and he's like, well, this guy's really good. but that guy's a little too good because, geez, I don't know, man. The board might want him to be my job. So I think I'm going to fire him. And I've seen it happen all the time. Some of the best people get laid off and transferred to different divisions to go in pretty much their career to die because the person on top is scared of them. That person is owned by them. And so this is what happened with King Saul and David. It's an amazing story. I encourage you to read the story of David and Saul. You'll find most of the book of Judges. Chronicles. Wait, I'm totally off. Samuel, forgive me. 1st and 2nd Samuel. Got a lot on my mind today. So if you go to the 1st and 2nd books of Samuel in the Bible in the Old Testament, you'll find the story of King David. And read his whole story from beginning to end and see how he went through this transition and how he was able to control the ego, right? And turn it into power inside of him and never betrayed the king, even when the king betrayed him. Most people nowadays tell you, like the world I came from on the street, they tell you, well, I'm never going to rat someone out until someone rats you out. And then they're like, oh, I'll rat everyone else out too. That's a coward. That's what a rat, a coward, and a lowlife is. Well, I'll rat them out because they ratted me out, kind of a thing. David never took that stance. He could have said, hey, this guy's ego's coming after me. He stepped over the line. That's why God anointed me as the next king and not him. So it's my duty. I can take him out. It's justified. So we can justify our actions. But the question I ask you is this. Are you actually justifying your actions? Or are you justifying your ego's actions? And that's the question you got to ask yourself. And you need to be truthful with yourself. See, I've learned a long time ago, you can lie to yourself. Man, it's a good story, right? And if no one's around, you might even buy into it. That's when you start learning leaders that buy into their own BS. Like they actually believe they're that great, that they could walk on water. Well, let me tell you, I've tried to walk on water, and I sink every time. I have tried to do some amazing things, and I just keep sinking in those areas. So I learned a long time ago, don't buy into my BS. And I would actually keep people on staff who would keep me in check, just in case they saw that ego rising. There were some very dear friends that would say, hey, Rev, yeah, let's have a talk about this. And then I would see it and go, oh my gosh, thank you. I'm so glad you caught that before it got bad and became a problem. And so have that intimate conversation with yourself. See if you can be truly honest about it and not lie to yourself, because the lie to yourself, no one else cares about it. No one else is going to know about it, but you will. And that's the part that you have to live with. Is it your ego, or is it really the right thing to do? So let's look at that life of Saul. Let's see how his ego controlled him. Let's see how David let his ego be put in check and allow himself to be humble, and he still became king. It took a few more years than expected, but that doesn't matter. He became king in the right time. Then his road from the beginning to the end is an amazing sermon in itself, and I'll preach on that again. I've already preached on it many times. My father titled it The Road to Zion, and he preached on it in his ministry from his beginning to the day he died in his 70s. And so the road to Zion is where he started as a shepherd and went all the way to the end as the king, ruling and reigning in Zion. And there's a process you have to go through. And your business, you could be looking at this saying the same thing. I just started my career. Here's the CEO position. And there's a journey you have to go through to get to that. And so if you don't have this journey here, then you don't understand how to rule and reign with God, with the kingdom. And part of that process is what we just talked about, and that's the ego. And how do we check the ego? Now, I want to caution you. As you start asking yourself questions, do I have an ego? You better answer yes, because everyone does. The next question you should ask yourself, do I allow my ego to control myself? Do I have people around me that put me in check, to remind me who I am, to remind me I put my pants on just like everybody else does, to remind me that I too have to go to the restroom. I have to powder my nose. I am not a one-stop shop hero, superhero, right? That's what you have to make sure you do. But you also need to not try to get rid of your ego. And here's the fine line. You see, an ego is a good thing. Without an ego, I never would have been one of the greatest salesmen in my industry. I never would have achieved the things that I did. I would have never accomplished the goals that I set and made. I never would have created sales percentages and the numbers and my average sales price and all of that, my costs per tours, none of those numbers would have been the way they were had I not had an ego. So you can't go to the extreme and say ego's bad. It's not bad. It's bad if you can't control it. It's very good. It's like a gun. Is a gun bad? Not at all. Cops wear them all the time. But it's the person holding the gun that can be bad or good. Guns have never killed a person. People kill people with a gun. Cars don't drive themselves to kill people. We drive the car and kills people. So it's about you and your ego. Can you control it? Can you master that? And that is something, my dear friends, that is very important to work on. And it's not something you're going to accomplish tomorrow. I'm 46 going on 47 and I've never accomplished it yet. But I continue to work at it. I continue to improve in it. I continue to talk to my mentors about it. I continue to make sure I keep it in check, but then allow it to free up when you need it. Because you do need it. When you're building a business, you need to exuberate confidence. And that comes from the ego. Oh yes, absolutely, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. I will have no problem accomplishing this product, this house you want built, and I can do this and I can do that because I've done this and I've done that, and so that's part of the ego coming out. That's a good thing. This is what I've done in my history. This is where I've preached. This is the company I built. This is the product I launched, and you're speaking about me, and that's okay. That's okay. That's a good thing. So it's important to remember the ego is a good thing when used properly, but it's a bad thing when abused. And it's like anything in life. You go under the counter in the kitchen and there's a bottle of wine. Is it a bad thing? Is it evil? Some would say no. Others would say it's the devil. Why is that? The ones that would say no, it's not a problem. It's because they don't allow it to be a problem in their lives. There are other people that if they even see the bottle of wine could flip out and become a drunk. I mean, they literally could just flip out, walk over if no one was around, grab that bottle and just chug the whole thing. Not to enjoy a nice glass of wine, but to try to get drunk because they have a problem with alcohol. So is the wine the bad thing? No, it's how we abuse it or use it. And your ego is the same thing. Are you abusing it or using it? And so I want you to discover this week, and I don't like to give all the answers. I just want you to get a question that sparks something up here and in the heart that maybe might help you become a little stronger, if you will. So as you go out this week, and I'm going to cut it short, I want you to think about the ego, the good ego, the smart way to use your ego. And I'd love to hear back from you on your ideas. How do you control your ego? What are the things you use to control your ego? What are the ways that you found that you abuse the ego and you catch yourself? And do you have any mentors in your life that kind of keep you in check with the ego and you can talk to them about that? If you don't, TCI, the Church of Inclusion, as the senior pastor and founder of this organization, which, by the way, we're celebrating this August, will be our 26th year. We're still in the middle of our 25th year in ministry. That's so exciting. And there's so many people involved in this ministry, from Maine to California, from Washington to Florida, and across the country, all in between, and now internationally. And so God has blessed us. If by chance you find that this organization, TCI, is ministering to you and you are getting fed from this ministry, we sure could use your offerings. And you guys know my stance when it comes to money. If you're a poor person and you're broke, I don't want your money. But I would love your time. I would love to help mentor you, put you with a mentor that can help you financially become financially wealthy. And we do that at the church. We actually find people who are, they come into the church, they're low income. We actually assign a mentor to them. We find a mentor for them, and it's usually a husband and a wife. And they teach them. They're a young couple over here, couple A, and the couple B is the mentor. Couple A comes in, they're in their 20s, they don't know much about life. Couple B says, look, we're not financial advisors, but we're just going to tell you how we did it, and maybe that'll help you. And so they give them, their story of how we built our wealth, how we started with an IRA, how we got into our 401ks, how we found a financial investor, how we stopped spending money going to the movies, watched the old reruns for free on TV, and instead of spending that $50 a month on that, we added 50 more to our retirement. And over the period of 20 years, that small sacrifice now is what's affording all that we have. And so people look at someone and says, well, I want what they have. Well, you got to sacrifice as they did. So how do you know how to do that? You just talk to them and you ask them, how'd you do it? How did you get to the place where you're financially able to afford all that you have? And that's how it works. So I love you guys. God loves you. Contact us. Let us know how we can help you. Send your prayer requests to our network. We got over 2,000 people that pray for you the second you let us know what you need in prayer. God bless. Remember, live positive. Let's coexist in this world instead of trying to divide.